Here's an equation with a variable term on each side. And we've marked our like terms. There's one variable term on the left and one on the right. One number on the left and one on the right. What we need to do is add the opposite of one of those four terms to both sides. So this time we choose 3n. The opposite is negative 3n, so we add it to both sides. And of course, on the left side, we have a pair of opposite terms. So we mark them out because they make 0. On the right side, we do the math. And we get that 7n plus negative 3n is 4n. And now we have an equation similar to one from an earlier lesson. So we're going to add negative 10 to both sides. And that's going to give us that 8 is equal to 4n. We divide both sides by 4 as we've done before. And we get that n is equal to 2. But we don't have to pick negative 3n in step 1, so we're going to do the problem a second time. This time we're going to pick the 7n, which has an opposite of negative 7n. So now we do the arithmetic on this one, and the problem looks a little bit different. Now, in order to solve this problem, instead of adding negative 10 to both sides, as we did before, we need to add negative 18 to both sides. And so we do. And the problem looks a little different. Now we have negative 4n is equal to negative 8. We divide both sides by negative 4, but our solution is still the same as it was the first time. N is equal to 2. Let's put both of those problems side by side so that we can see how they look a little bit different, but the final answer is n is equal to 2. When each equation began, there were 4 terms, 2 on each side. We could have picked any one of the 4 terms, found the opposite, and added that to each side. We didn't do it all 4 ways. We did it 2 different ways, but we could have also begun by adding negative 18 to both sides, or perhaps adding negative 10 to both sides. What's important is, while your first choice is kind of open in that you can pick any one of the 4 terms, once you've made your first choice, then your next choice, the one in the second line, which on the left was to add negative 10, and on the right, add negative 18, that choice is not a choice. It's dependent on the choice made in the first line. Let's try another problem. I've chosen to add the opposite of 5n to both sides. Here's the arithmetic. And to save time, I can write the next choice right next to it. So after adding negative 5n to both sides and marking out the opposites, I then realize that the variable term is going to end up on the left side, so I need to have the numerical term on the right side. That's why I need to add negative 12 to both sides. So I have a variable term on the left side, turns out to be 8n, and a numerical term, in this case 24 on the right side. I finish it up by dividing both sides by 8. And the answer, of course, is n equals 3. Here's another one. I remind myself that an n is the same as 1n, so I write that there. And then I make the choice to add negative 1n to both sides, which means that all of the variable terms in this problem are going to be on the right. So I need to move that 30 over to the other side by, of course, adding the opposite. I mark out the opposites, 30 plus negative 30. I do the arithmetic on the other 2, and I get that negative 18 is equal to 12n. I divide both sides by 12, and I get that the final answer is negative 1.5, which of course could also be written as negative 3/2. Here's one that involves subtraction. I'm going to change the subtractions to add the opposite by applying the definition of subtraction. Then, since I don't like negative numbers, I'm going to choose to add 7n to both sides, and that's going to make a 9n on the left side once I get around to doing the arithmetic. But before I do that, I'm also going to have to add 17 to both sides to get all the variable terms on the left and all the numerical terms on the right. Doing the arithmetic, I finally get that 9n is equal to 36, divide both sides by 9, and of course n is equal to 4. Here's a problem that involves the distributive property. Without showing as much work as I have in past lessons, we're going to apply the distributive property. The 2 times 3n is 6n, the 2 times 9 is 18, and on the right side, 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 4n is 12n. Now I'll apply the definition of subtraction. I'll take a look at those 4 terms. I'll pick one of them. I pick the negative 12n. The opposite is 12n. I add that to both sides. I mark out the opposites. And now that I see the variable terms will be on the left, I need to put the numerical terms on the right. So that means I must add negative 18 to both sides as shown. Mark out the opposites. I get that 18n is equal to negative 12. Divide both sides by 18. And I get that n is equal to negative 2/3, which written as a decimal, of course, is negative 0.6 repeating. Here's one more example. First, we'll apply the definition of subtraction, then we'll add 3n to both sides. We'll mark out the opposites, and then we'll add 4 to both sides. Mark out the opposites again. But perhaps you've noticed something is amiss. We have 5n plus 15, but they're both on the left side, so there's nothing left on the right side. Now this is done quite often, but it can be rectified. The most common error, however, is that problem solvers become confused at this point and replace the plus sign with the equal sign. But instead of getting confused, what needs to be recognized is that whenever the variable and the number are both on the same side, that since both of those pairs of opposites add up to 0, we need to write the 0 on the right side. Normally, we don't write the 0 because normally there'll be another term on the right side, and a number plus 0 is itself. So the 0 isn't necessary to write. But in this case, it is. So while we've wasted a little time and perhaps some unnecessary writing, we haven't broken any rules. We've added 3n to both sides, and we've added 4 to both sides. But we can fix it now by adding negative 15 to both sides to get back on track. Not very efficient, but we ultimately will get that 5n is equal to negative 15. Divide both sides by 5, and our final solution is n is equal to negative 3. To summarize, when solving equations with a variable term on each side, perform transformations as necessary until one side contains a variable term and the other side contains a number. Then divide both sides by the coefficient of the variable.